Scarlett Everhart stood alone at the charity ball that would change her life forever. The daughter of a bankrupt merchant, invisible among silk gowns and inherited jewels, she had mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. But the Dowager Duchess had been watching her all evening, and when those sharp, calculating eyes finally met hers across the candlelit ballroom, Scarlett felt the air shift. She did not know yet that within the hour, her name would be on every tongue in London society. The ballroom sparkled with false warmth. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across polished marble, while dancers moved to the string quartet. Scarlett Everhart stood near the tall windows, partially concealed by potted palms, perfecting the art of disappearing in plain sight. 6 months since her father's bankruptcy stripped away their comfortable life. Her emerald silk gown remained beautiful, but Scarlett knew what others saw. The let-down hem, the ribbon replacing a pearl clasp, the restitched gloves. She wore her dignity like armor against whispers and sideways glances. Tonight was supposed to be different. A charity ball where even fallen families might find courtesy. She had been wrong. Lady Pemberton had turned away. Mrs. Harrington looked through her like glass. Even Caroline Ashford, once her friend, offered only a tight smile before hurrying toward more prestigious company. Scarlett breathed slowly and lifted her chin. She would stand here with Grace, then return home where her mother waited anxiously. Her sister practiced abandoned music lessons, and her father stared at impossible ledgers. Then she heard voices beyond the palms. "You see the Everhart girl?" Lady Ashcombe's tone dripped pleasure, lurking like a ghost, quite pathetic. Her daughter giggled. 4 and 20 is practically ancient. "No dowry, no connections, no prospects," Lady Ashcombe replied, though she might still be useful to the right family. The Everharts were respectable once. "Would she accept a marriage of convenience?" the daughter asked. "I imagine she would accept anything. Pride is a luxury the desperate cannot afford." The words cut deep because they held truth. Scarlett had already considered such possibilities when her mother grew thinner from worry, and creditors sent letters that made her father's hands shake. Then a new voice cut through with blade-sharp precision. Would she accept an engagement? Lady Ashcombe fell silent. Scarlett's heart hammered as a tall figure emerged. The Dowager Duchess of Thornhill, Edward's mother. "Your Grace," Lady Ashcombe stammered. "We were simply observing. Perhaps your time might be better spent managing your own daughter's prospects," the Dowager replied. "Her 3rd season without an acceptable offer, I understand." Lady Ashcombe flushed dark red. The Dowager moved with absolute certainty toward Scarlett's hiding place. No time to flee. The Dowager stopped directly before her, dark eyes sharp and assessing. Violet silk and diamonds caught the light with every breath. "Miss Everhart, walk with me, not a request." Scarlett managed a small curtsy. "Your Grace, the conservatory." Now. The conservatory was cooler, filled with exotic plants and fountain sounds. Moonlight filtered through glass ceiling. The Dowager stopped beside white orchids. "You heard what they said," the Dowager stated. Scarlett lifted her chin. "Yes, you are proud enough to be wounded by it, practical enough to recognize truth within cruelty." The Dowager's gaze moved over Scarlett's carefully maintained appearance. "You have managed your circumstances with admirable dignity." Scarlett remained silent, waiting. "Tell me, how desperate is your situation? How far would you go to save your family from complete ruin?" "I would do anything honorable," Scarlett said finally, "but I will not sacrifice my integrity for gold." "Good. Then perhaps we can help each other." She gestured to a stone bench. "What I propose will sound mad, but I am entirely serious." Scarlett sat, hands folded to stop trembling. "My son is Edward Thorne, Duke of Thornhill, 30 years old, significant wealth, considered England's most eligible man." She paused. "He is also the most stubborn, marriage-averse creature I have encountered." Despite nervousness, Scarlett felt amusement flicker. She had heard the stories. "The gossip has become dangerous," the Dowager continued. "Whispers that he prefers men's company, that he is secretly married, impotent, mad, all nonsense but damaging." She met Scarlett's eyes. "He needs a fiancée, just for tonight." Your Grace, I do not understand. I want you to pretend to be engaged to my son. For this evening only, I will introduce you as his chosen bride. That is impossible, Scarlet whispered. I am nobody. Which is precisely why it might work, the Dowager replied. You have no powerful connections, no social position to leverage. You are desperate enough to be discreet and intelligent enough to be convincing. What would you gain? Time? Silence. A season without scandal, and perhaps Edward might actually consider a real engagement. Scarlet's stomach dropped. You want this to become genuine. I want my son to have a partner worthy of his position. But first, we must convince London he is capable of choosing anyone at all. This is madness. When truth emerges, I will be ruined. You are already ruined, Miss Everhart, the Dowager said with devastating gentleness. Your family is bankrupt. Your prospects non-existent. She leaned forward. I'm offering money to save your family from debtor's prison, a season as London's most envied woman, and the possibility of a genuine match with a man of honor. The fountain trickled softly. Scarlet thought of her mother's hollow cheeks, her sister's abandoned lessons, her father's shaking hands. She thought of Lady Ashcombe's cruel laughter, of being invisible, of poverty's slow suffocation. What would I have to do? Follow my lead. Say nothing unless asked. Look at my son as if you chose him. The Dowager extended one gloved hand. Can you do that? Scarlet's hand shook as she reached out. Their fingers met. Yes. The word felt like stepping off a cliff in darkness. Excellent. Where did you meet my son? The library at the Cunningham estate. Last month. A discussion of medieval architecture. He was examining a manuscript. The Dowager nodded. Specific, respectable, plausible. When did understanding develop? Gradually. Through letters, conversations. He appreciated my mind before considering my circumstances. Perfect, a romance built on intellectual compatibility. Society will find it idealistic. She released Scarlet's hand. Remember, you are not playing a fortune hunter. You captured a duke's heart through wit and character. Believe it yourself and they will believe it. Scarlet stood, legs unsteady. What happens when your son discovers this? Edward is brilliant. He will understand the necessity. And if not, she added with a slight smile, we shall learn how convincing you can be under pressure. She moved toward the door, then paused. Do not fall in love with him. This is a performance, nothing more. Mixing genuine feeling with strategic necessity only leads to heartbreak. Scarlet felt something cold settle in her chest. Of course, Your Grace. The Dowager studied her, and Scarlet had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen through, all her desperate hopes laid bare. Come. Let us give London something to talk about. They walked back into blazing light and noise. Eyes turned immediately. Lady Ashcombe's shock, Mrs. Harrington's dropped fan, whispers spreading like rings in disturbed water. The Dowager led her straight to the ballroom center, where dancers had just completed a set. Musicians paused. Conversations faltered. The Dowager raised her voice, just enough to carry across sudden quiet. My dear friends, I have wonderful news. My son Edward, Duke of Thornhill, has chosen a bride at last. Silence was absolute. Scarlet's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. May I present Miss Scarlet Everhart? She paused, smile brilliant and terrible. My future daughter-in-law. The ballroom erupted. The announcement rippled through the ballroom like a stone thrown into still water. Scarlet felt the weight of every gaze pressing against her skin. Miss Scarlet Everhart, my future daughter-in-law. For one terrible moment, Scarlet thought her legs might give way. The chandeliers seemed too bright, the air too thick. Lady Ashcombe's mouth hung open in disbelief. Mrs. Harrington clutched her fan. Caroline Ashford stared with something like envy. The Dowager's hand closed firmly around Scarlet's elbow, a grip that appeared gentle but held iron strength. Her smile never wavered as she guided Scarlet through the parting crowd. "Where is the Duke?" someone called out. "Edward had urgent business this evening," the Dowager replied smoothly. "But I simply could not contain my joy." She squeezed Scarlet's arm. "My son has chosen so wisely. Scarlett forced herself to breathe, to smile, to meet the eyes of women who had ignored her minutes ago. She lifted her chin and channeled every ounce of dignity her mother had taught her. "Miss Everhart," Lady Pemberton approached with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "What a remarkable surprise. We had no idea you and the Duke were acquainted. They met at the Cunningham estate last month." The Dowager spoke first. A discussion of medieval architecture. Edward was quite taken with Miss Everhart's knowledge of historical building techniques. The Dowager's tone suggested this should have been obvious. "My son has always valued intelligence over social theatrics." The subtle barb landed perfectly. Lady Pemberton's smile tightened. How romantic, Mrs. Harrington fanned herself dramatically. Though one does wonder about the suddenness. When one finds true compatibility, delay serves no purpose, the Dowager said with frost. "My son is not a man who acts without certainty." And the wedding. Lady Ashcombe appeared, burgundy silk rustling with predatory interest. Scarlett felt the trap closing. She had no answers for questions cutting to the fabrication's weakest points. "All in good time," the Dowager said with a warning edge. Lady Ashcombe heard it. She smiled with razor sharpness. "I confess surprise that the Everhart family circumstances did not prove an obstacle, given recent difficulties." The words hung like drawn blades. Scarlett felt heat flood her cheeks, shame and anger mixing. Lady Ashcombe was painting her as a fortune hunter who had trapped a duke through manipulation. Before Scarlett could speak, the Dowager turned to face Lady Ashcombe directly. "My dear Lady Ashcombe," the Dowager's voice drew attention, "I have always admired your social observation. Though I find it curious you concern yourself with other families when your own daughter remains unmarried after 3 seasons." Nearby conversations stopped. Lady Ashcombe's face went crimson. Her daughter made a sound of distress. "Financial security is important," the Dowager continued conversationally but surgically, "but surely you understand that true nobility lies in character rather than circumstance. Miss Everhart has conducted herself with grace through trials that would have broken lesser women. That is precisely the strength my son values." She paused, allowing the words to settle. "Now, if you will excuse us." She steered Scarlett away, leaving Lady Ashcombe frozen in humiliation. Scarlett's hands were shaking. "That was necessary," the Dowager finished. "She will spread poison regardless. Better to establish dominance now." She nodded to passing couples. "Smile, Miss Everhart. You have just become the most interesting woman in London." They moved through the ballroom in careful social performance. The Dowager introduced Scarlett to influential families, shared carefully constructed courtship details, and deflected intrusive questions with decades of skill. Scarlett played her part. She smiled, lowered her eyes at compliments, allowed examination by women looking for cracks in the facade. Every moment felt like walking across ice that might shatter. But beneath the performance, Scarlett began to notice something else. Younger women looked at her with hope. Gentlemen regarded her with new respect. Even those who had snubbed her now sought her attention, as if her sudden elevation changed everything about who she was. It was intoxicating and terrifying. After an hour, the Dowager guided Scarlett toward a quiet alcove. They stood beside a marble column, close enough to observe but far enough for private conversation. "You did well." "Better than I expected." Scarlett released a shaky breath. "How long must we continue this tonight? Until we establish the narrative firmly enough that contradiction becomes impossible. By morning, every drawing room will be discussing your engagement. By week's end, it will be accepted fact. And when your son discovers what you have done..." The Dowager's expression shifted, revealing something almost like affection. "Edward is brilliant, stubborn, and occasionally infuriating. But he is also pragmatic. He will understand I have placed him in a position where denial would cause greater scandal than acceptance." Scarlett felt cold settle in her stomach. "You have trapped him. I have protected him. And given you an opportunity most women in your position could never dream of achieving." "At what cost?" The Dowager turned fully. "Listen carefully. What I tell you will determine whether this succeeds or fails." Scarlett waited, hardly breathing. My son refuses marriage not because he dislikes women or fears commitment. He refuses because he watched his father treat marriage as a business transaction that left both parties miserable. The dowager's voice carried old pain. Edward wants partnership, intellectual equality, genuine connection. He has never found a woman willing to see past his title to the man beneath. And you think I can provide that? I think you are intelligent enough to understand what he needs. Desperate enough to fight for this chance, and proud enough to refuse to be merely decorative. The dowager's gaze was penetrating. The question is whether you are brave enough to become genuine when the time comes. Before Scarlett could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. The crowd parted, whispers rising. A man stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in evening clothes of impeccable cut, dark hair slightly disheveled. Strong features set in controlled fury that made confident men step aside. The Duke of Thornhill had returned. Edward's eyes swept the ballroom, taking in the unusual energy, the way conversations faltered. His gaze found his mother, then traveled to the woman beside her, to Scarlett. Their eyes met across the space, and Scarlett felt the impact like a physical blow. Intelligence burned in those dark eyes, along with barely contained rage and something else she could not name. He knew. Edward Thorne already knew exactly what his mother had done, and he was walking straight toward them. The dowager's hand tightened on Scarlett's arm. "Remember," she whispered urgently, "you are his fiancée. Act as if you chose him, as if this was always meant to be." Scarlett could not look away from the approaching Duke, could not pretend she did not see the storm in his expression. Edward stopped 3 feet away, close enough for private conversation, but far enough for propriety. Every eye in the ballroom watched. "Mother," Edward said quietly, his voice carrying dangerous calm. "What have you done?" The dowager smiled with absolute serenity. "Edward, darling, allow me to properly introduce you to your fiancé." Edward's jaw tightened. His gaze shifted fully to Scarlett, assessing her with devastating precision. Looking for weakness, deception, any sign she was complicit in this manipulation. Scarlett forced herself to meet his eyes. She would not apologize, would not cower. If she was to be destroyed, she would face it with dignity. "Miss Everhart," Edward said finally, tone giving nothing away. "How extraordinary to discover our private understanding has become quite so public." The words were a gift, an escape route offered in disaster. Scarlett seized it. "Your Grace," she replied, voice steady despite terror, "your mother's joy was simply too great to contain." Edward's eyes narrowed fractionally. She noticed sharp intelligence in his gaze, controlled strength in his posture, the way his hands remained perfectly still as if holding back powerful impulse. Then his expression shifted, not softening, but recalibrating. He extended one hand toward her. "Then perhaps we should give them something worth celebrating." Scarlett placed her shaking hand in his, feeling warmth and strength. Edward drew her closer, just near enough for propriety, and lowered his voice so only she and his mother could hear. "We will discuss this later." All of it. The promise in those words was not gentle, but for now he offered his arm with devastating courtesy, and together they faced the ballroom full of witnesses to a lie that was rapidly becoming something far more complicated than either had imagined. Edward's hand was warm and firm beneath hers, steadying her even as Scarlett's world tilted. She could feel tension radiating from him, barely concealed beneath aristocratic composure. Every person in the ballroom watched with hungry fascination, waiting for cracks to appear. The orchestra began a waltz. Edward turned to Scarlett, expression unreadable. "Shall we dance, Miss Everhart?" It was not really a question. Scarlett found herself guided onto the floor before she could process what was happening. Other couples made space, creating a circle of observation that felt more like a gladiatorial arena. Edward's hand settled at her waist, proper but possessive. His other hand enclosed hers with controlled strength. This close she could see fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the sharp intelligence that missed nothing, the muscle working in his jaw. "You dance well for someone who was not expecting to perform tonight," Edward said quietly. His voice was pitched for her ears alone, smooth and dangerous as silk over steel. "Your mother is very persuasive," Scarlett replied. "My mother is very many things." His eyes never left hers, studying her with intensity that made her breath catch. "Tell me, Miss Everhart, did she threaten you or simply appeal to your desperation?" The bluntness caught Scarlett off guard. She stumbled slightly, but Edward's grip tightened, keeping her upright and in rhythm. "She offered me a choice," Scarlett said finally. "Save my family, or watch them fall further into ruin. And you chose survival." Something flickered in his eyes. "I cannot fault you for that. Though I confess curiosity about why you believed I would simply accept this arrangement. Your mother seemed confident you would see the necessity. My mother believes many things with absolute certainty. It is one of her more dangerous qualities." They turned in perfect synchronization. "Tell me what she promised you beyond money." Scarlett hesitated. 3 months as your fiancée. Time enough to silence speculation and protect your reputation. And after 3 months, an amicable end. Compensation for my family. A story of mutual discovery that we would not suit. Edward's mouth tightened. How tidy, how utterly predictable. He pulled her fractionally closer. "My mother has always been gifted at creating situations that serve her purposes while appearing to serve others." "You could deny it," Scarlett said, hearing desperation in her voice. "Right now. Tell them all the truth, and destroy you completely in the process." Edward's voice carried something that might have been anger or reluctant respect. "You may not know me, Miss Everhart, but understand this. I do not solve my problems by sacrificing those weaker than myself. My mother placed you in an impossible position. I will not compound that cruelty." Scarlett felt something shift in her chest. She had expected rage or dismissal. She had not expected protection offered without hesitation. "Then what do you propose?" Edward was silent for several measures, calculating. When he spoke again, his voice had become cooler, more strategic. "We maintain the engagement. 3 months, as agreed. Long enough to satisfy society's curiosity and end my mother's matchmaking crusade." He met her eyes directly, "But understand this clearly. I will not be manipulated into genuine attachment through proximity and performance. When this ends, it ends cleanly. No drama, no scandal. A mutual decision reached by 2 rational adults." "Of course," Scarlett said, ignoring the strange disappointment that bloomed beneath her relief. "Good. Then we understand each other." His thumb moved almost absently against her waist, and Scarlett felt the touch through layers of fabric like a brand. "The financial arrangement my mother offered will be honored, regardless of how this concludes. You have my word. Thank you." "Do not thank me, Miss Everhart. I'm not doing this for you. I am doing this because my mother forced both our hands, and I refuse to let her manipulation destroy an innocent person." The words should have stung, but Scarlett found herself oddly reassured by his honesty. Edward was treating her as an equal partner in an impossible situation. The waltz was ending. Edward released her with careful propriety, but kept her hand in his as he led her back toward where the dowager watched with satisfaction. "Mother," Edward said with devastating courtesy, "thank you for such a memorable evening. I believe Miss Everhart and I have much to discuss regarding our future arrangements." The dowager's smile was triumphant. "Of course, darling, though perhaps such discussions might wait until tomorrow. Miss Everhart looks rather overwhelmed. I imagine sudden engagements have that effect." He turned to Scarlett. "May I call on you tomorrow afternoon? We should establish the practical details of our understanding before society demands more public performances." Scarlett nodded, still processing the shift from disaster to negotiation. "Tomorrow would be acceptable, Your Grace." "Edward, if we are to be engaged even temporarily, you should use my given name, at least when others might overhear." The intimacy sent heat through Scarlett's cheeks. "Edward." His eyes darkened fractionally at the sound of his name in her voice, but his expression remained controlled. "Miss Everhart." He bowed with perfect formality, then turned to his mother. "A word, if you please. Privately." The dowager's satisfaction dimmed slightly, but she inclined her head. "Of course." Scarlett watched them move toward a private corner, Edward's posture radiating barely controlled fury. She knew he was likely delivering a lecture that would have made lesser women tremble. But the Dowager had achieved exactly what she wanted. "Miss Everhart," a familiar voice said behind her. Scarlett turned to find Caroline Ashford approaching, her earlier distance replaced by cautious curiosity. "Caroline, I wanted to apologize for earlier. I should not have ignored you. It was unkind." Scarlett studied her former friend's face, seeing genuine discomfort. "We are all careful about our associations. I understand. Still," Caroline twisted her fan between gloved hands. "I am glad you have found happiness. The Duke seems quite devoted." The lie sat heavy on Scarlett's tongue, but she forced a smile. "He is very kind and handsome. Half the ballroom is wondering what you did to capture his attention when so many others failed." "Perhaps I simply listened," Scarlett said, surprised by her honesty, instead of performing. Caroline's expression shifted to something thoughtful. Perhaps that is what he needed all along. Before Scarlett could respond, Edward and his mother returned. Edward's face was carefully blank, but his mother's satisfaction had been replaced by something more complex. "Miss Everhart," the Dowager said warmly, "my carriage will collect you at 10 tomorrow morning. We have much to prepare and very little time to accomplish it." Scarlett blinked. 10? But Edward said afternoon. The Dowager smiled. "My son will call in the afternoon. But first, you and I must discuss wardrobes, social calendars, and the practical realities of being a duke's fiancée. Even a temporary one must look the part." Edward's jaw tightened, but he did not contradict his mother. Scarlett felt the trap close once more. "Tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow," the Dowager agreed. "The beginning of your new life, my dear." Scarlett glanced at Edward, seeking some sign of reassurance, but he was already looking away. His profile was sharp in the candlelight, remote and unreachable. She had survived tonight. She had secured her family's future and gained the protection of one of England's most powerful men. So why did she feel like she had just signed away something far more precious than her name? The ballroom continued to spin around them, music and laughter, and whispered speculation creating a cocoon of false celebration. Scarlett stood at the center of it all, wearing a borrowed smile and a fabricated future, wondering how 3 months of careful lies would shape the person she would become, and whether Edward Thorne, with his controlled fury and unexpected protection, would remain as distant as he promised, or become something far more dangerous to her carefully guarded heart. The morning sunlight filtered through the drawing-room windows of Scarlett's modest townhouse. She sat with her mother and sister, caught in strange limbo between their old life and whatever came next. "Mother," Alice breathed, her 17-year-old face bright with hope. "Is it truly real? Are you engaged to the Duke of Thornhill?" Scarlett's mother, Margaret Everhart, watched her eldest daughter with eyes that had learned to see past surface performances. She had said nothing since Scarlett returned home last night, with news that should have been joyous, but felt more like a prison sentence wrapped in silk. "It is real," Scarlett said quietly, the lie tasting like ash. "But how?" Alice leaned forward eagerly. "You never mentioned knowing him. When did you meet? How did he propose?" Scarlett opened her mouth to repeat the fabricated story, but her father's entrance stopped her. Thomas Everhart looked older than his 50 years, shoulders bent under the weight of debts he could not pay. "The Dowager Duchess's carriage has arrived," he said, voice carefully neutral. "She is waiting. Already?" Scarlett glanced at the clock. Barely past 9. "Punctuality is a duchess's prerogative," Margaret said with a ghost of humor. "Go, darling. We will discuss everything when you return." Scarlett rose, smoothing her second-best morning dress. Alice hugged her tightly, whispering congratulations that felt like tiny knives. Her father kissed her forehead with surprising gentleness, and her mother simply held her gaze for a long moment, questions and understanding passing between them without words. The Dowager's carriage was luxurious, imposing, marked with the Thornhill crest in gold. Scarlett climbed inside to find the Dowager waiting, dressed in deep green silk. "Good morning, Miss Everhart. I trust you slept well despite the excitement." Scarlett had not slept at all, but she simply nodded. The carriage began moving, and the Dowager immediately launched into detailed discussion of everything that would need to happen. Wardrobes to be commissioned, social calls to be made, appearances to be scheduled. Scarlett listened with growing dread, as her temporary engagement revealed itself to be far more consuming than she had imagined. They arrived at the Thornhill London residence just as church bells struck 10. The house was magnificent, all white stone and elegant proportions. Inside was even more impressive: marble floors, painted ceilings, furnishings that cost more than Scarlett's family home. A stern-faced woman in black waited in the entrance hall. "Mrs. Thornbury, the housekeeper," the dowager said. "She will show you to the guest quarters where you will be staying." "Staying?" Scarlett's voice came out higher than intended. The dowager raised one elegant eyebrow. "Did you imagine we would maintain this engagement with you living across London?" "No, my dear. You will reside here as my guest and Edward's fiancée. Properly chaperoned, of course." Scarlett felt the trap tighten. "Your son agreed to this." "My son will see the necessity." The dowager's tone suggested the discussion was closed. The guest quarters were beautiful and terrifying in their luxury. Scarlett stood at the window overlooking the garden when a knock announced Mrs. Thornbury's return. "His Grace requests your presence in the library," the housekeeper said with cool formality. The library was exactly what Scarlett had imagined when inventing their fictional meeting place. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes, comfortable chairs near a fireplace, the scent of old paper and beeswax. Edward stood with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him, staring at a painting. "Thank you, Mrs. Thornbury," he said without turning. "That will be all." The door closed with a soft click, leaving them alone. Edward turned to face her, and Scarlett felt the full force of his controlled anger. He was dressed simply in day clothes, but the severity of his expression made him intimidating. "My mother has informed me that you will be residing under this roof for the duration of our arrangement," Edward said without preamble. "I assume this was not part of your original agreement." "No," Scarlett admitted. "It was not. And yet, you did not refuse." "I was not given the opportunity to refuse." Edward's mouth tightened. "That is my mother's particular genius, creating situations where refusal becomes impossible." He crossed to the desk and poured 2 glasses of sherry, offering one to Scarlett. "Sit. We need to establish rules if we are to survive 3 months under the same roof." Scarlett took the glass with shaking hands and settled into a chair. Edward remained standing. "First," he began, tone businesslike, "you will have complete freedom within this house and grounds. You are not a prisoner. Second, we will maintain separate quarters with absolute propriety. I will not have anyone suggest impropriety between us." "Of course," Scarlett murmured. "Third, we will need to appear together at key social events, but I will not demand your presence at every gathering. Choose where your absence would cause speculation. Decline the rest. Fourth, you will be treated as my honored guest by all staff. Anyone who shows you disrespect will answer to me directly." Scarlett looked up at him, surprised by the vehemence in that last statement. "You may not have chosen this situation," Edward said more quietly, "but you are here as a result of my mother's machinations, not your own scheming. I will not allow anyone to treat you as less than you are." "And what am I?" Scarlett asked before she could stop herself. Edward studied her for a long moment, dark eyes unreadable. "That, Miss Everhart, is what we have 3 months to determine." The answer was not what she expected. Scarlett took a sip of sherry, needing something to steady her nerves. "What are your rules for me?" she asked. Edward seemed surprised. "My rules, you have outlined what you expect. It seems only fair that I do the same." A ghost of something that might have been respect crossed his features. "Very well. What do you require?" "Honesty," Scarlett said immediately. "If this arrangement becomes too burdensome, if you wish to end it early, tell me directly. Do not let resentment build." "Agreed." Edward's expression softened fractionally. "What else?" "Respect for my family. They know nothing of the true nature of our arrangement. Allow me to maintain the fiction with them. Your parents believe this engagement is genuine." "My mother suspects the truth," Scarlett admitted, "but my sister and father believe I have somehow captured your attention through sheer good fortune." Edward made a sound that might have been amusement. "Then we shall not disabuse them of that notion. Anything else?" Scarlett hesitated, then pushed forward. "When this ends, I want your word that you will not simply disappear, that we will craft the ending together in a way that preserves both our dignities." Edward set down his glass and moved closer, stopping just at the edge of proper distance. His proximity made Scarlett's breath catch. "You have my word, Miss Everhart. When this arrangement concludes, it will be on terms we both find acceptable." He extended his hand. "Are we agreed?" Scarlett placed her hand in his, feeling warmth and strength. "Agreed." They shook hands with the formality of business partners sealing a contract, but Scarlett felt something electric pass between them at the contact. From Edward's sharp intake of breath, he felt it too. He released her hand quickly, stepping back. "My mother will no doubt fill your afternoon with preparations," Edward said, tone returning to cool courtesy. "I will see you at dinner. We dine at 8 when in residence. Will your mother join us?" "Regularly, I fear. Though perhaps tonight we might claim exhaustion and dine informally in the small parlor. Give ourselves time to adjust." "That would be welcome," Scarlett said gratefully. Edward moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Everhart, one more thing." "Yes?" He turned to face her fully, expression serious. "I know you did not seek this situation. I know my mother placed you in an impossible position. But I want you to understand something clearly. While you are under my protection, you are under my protection absolutely. No one will harm you, physically or socially, without answering to me. Do you understand?" Scarlett felt unexpected tears prick her eyes at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. "Yes, thank you." Edward nodded once, then left, leaving Scarlett alone in the library surrounded by books and the lingering scent of his cologne, wondering how 3 months of careful distance could ever be maintained when every moment in his presence made her more aware of the man behind the title, and more frightened of what that awareness might cost them both. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both foreign and strangely natural. Scarlett moved through the Thornhill residence like a ghost, learning to haunt in luxury, her mornings spent with the dowager planning social appearances, her afternoons in quiet solitude, and her evenings navigating carefully choreographed dinners where Edward played the attentive fiancé with devastating precision. But it was the unscripted moments that undid her. The morning she found Edward in the conservatory at dawn, tending orchids with surprising gentleness. The afternoon he appeared with a book he thought she might enjoy, his fingers brushing hers. The evening she stumbled on the stairs, and his arm caught her waist, holding her steady for 3 heartbeats longer than necessary. Each moment chipped away at the careful distance they had agreed to maintain. Tonight marked their 4th public appearance, an intimate dinner party hosted by the Earl of Winchester. 20 guests, multiple courses, endless scrutiny. Scarlett stood before her mirror while Marie arranged her hair in an elegant style that belonged to someone else entirely. The gown was new as well, sapphire silk that clung before falling in elegant lines with delicate beading that caught light. The dowager had insisted on an entirely new wardrobe. Scarlett barely recognized the woman staring back at her. A knock preceded Edward's entrance. Marie curtsied and slipped out. Edward stood just inside the doorway, dressed in evening clothes that emphasized his broad shoulders and controlled strength. His gaze traveled over her with an intensity that made Scarlett's breath catch. "You look," he began, then stopped. His jaw tightened. "The gown is acceptable." Acceptable. Scarlett felt something twist in her chest. Edward moved closer, and Scarlett caught the scent of his cologne. "She will be pleased to hear you approve of her choices." He pulled a velvet box from his pocket. "Though I selected this myself." He opened it to reveal a sapphire necklace that matched her gown perfectly, the stones deep and brilliant, set in delicate gold. "Edward," Scarlett breathed, "I cannot accept this. You can and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "We are engaged. Society expects me to adorn my future wife with jewels. Turn around." Scarlett turned, pulse racing as Edward stepped behind her. She felt his fingers brush her nape as he fastened the necklace, the touch sending shivers down her spine. His breath was warm against her shoulder, and for a moment they both stood frozen, his hands lingering at her collarbone. "There," Edward said quietly, stepping back with what seemed like effort. "Now you are properly equipped." Scarlett touched the necklace with trembling fingers, meeting Edward's eyes in the mirror. "It is beautiful. Thank you. It suits you." Edward's expression was unreadable. "Shall we?" The dinner party was exactly as exhausting as Scarlett expected. She navigated conversations with practiced grace, played the role of devoted fiancée with increasing skill. But beneath the performance, she was hyper-aware of Edward beside her. The way his hand rested at the small of her back, the protective way he redirected conversations, the softness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Lady Winchester, their hostess, cornered Scarlett after dinner while the men remained with their port. "Miss Everhart, or should I say future Duchess, you have created quite the sensation this season." "I did not intend to," Scarlett replied honestly. "The best matches never do." Lady Winchester studied her thoughtfully. "I knew Edward's father, a difficult man, cold, calculated every relationship as a transaction." She paused. "Edward is not his father, but he carries those scars. Whatever you did to capture his attention, do not lose that quality." Scarlett felt guilt twist in her stomach. "I try, my lady." "Good, because I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, as if you are a puzzle he desperately wants to solve." Before Scarlett could respond, Edward appeared at her elbow. "Lady Winchester, forgive the interruption, but I find myself in need of my fiancé's company." Edward guided Scarlett toward the terrace doors with gentle insistence. They stepped out into cool night air, leaving the noise behind. Gas lamps illuminated the garden in soft pools of light. "You looked uncomfortable," Edward said quietly. "I thought you might need escape." Scarlett leaned against the stone balustrade. "Lady Winchester was asking about our courtship. I fear my invented details grow less convincing." "Perhaps we should simply tell the truth," Edward suggested. Scarlett turned to stare at him. "What truth? That your mother orchestrated this?" "No. That we met under unusual circumstances and discovered unexpected compatibility." His gaze held hers. It would not be entirely false. Scarlett's heart hammered. "Edward, I know what we agreed," he interrupted, voice low and intense. 3 months of careful distance, a clean ending, no complications." He moved closer, but I find myself reconsidering the wisdom of those terms. "Why?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "Because you challenge me, Miss Everhart. You do not defer to my title or seek to please me with empty flattery. You argue with me about philosophy. You correct my Latin translations. You laugh at my rare attempts at humor." His hand rose as if to touch her face, then dropped. "You make me forget we are performing." "We are performing," Scarlett said, even as something in her chest ached. That was the agreement. Then perhaps the agreement was flawed. Edward's expression was raw in the lamplight. Perhaps my mother, for all her manipulation, saw something neither of us was willing to acknowledge. "What are you saying?" Edward stepped closer, close enough that Scarlett could feel the heat radiating from him. "I am saying that somewhere between the fabricated library meeting and tonight, the fiction began to feel like truth. I am saying that when I watch you navigate social warfare with grace, I feel pride. When I see other men admire you, I feel possessive. When you argue with me, I feel alive." He paused, jaw tight. "And when I touch you, even accidentally, I feel something I did not expect to feel again." Scarlett's breath caught. "What did you expect to feel?" "Nothing." Edward's voice was almost bitter. "I expected nothing because I had convinced myself I wanted nothing. Marriage was a duty to be endured, not a partnership to be desired. And then my mother trapped us both, and you stood in that ballroom looking terrified and brave, and I realized—" He stopped abruptly. "Realized what?" Scarlett prompted, voice shaking. "That perhaps I had been wrong about what I wanted." Edward's hand finally made contact, fingers tracing her jawline with devastating gentleness, about what was possible. Scarlett closed her eyes against the sensation, fighting the urge to lean into his touch. "This is dangerous. I know. We could ruin everything." "I know that too." His thumb brushed her lower lip, and Scarlett's eyes flew open to find him staring at her mouth with barely controlled hunger. "But I find I no longer care about careful planning and strategic distance. I care about whether you feel this too." "Feel what?" Edward's other hand came up to frame her face, his touch achingly tender. "This pull between us. This awareness that makes every accidental touch feel deliberate. This growing certainty that 3 months will not be enough." Scarlett's hands came up to grip his wrists, needing anchor. "I feel it," she admitted. "Heaven help me, I feel it too." Edward's expression transformed, control slipping to reveal raw need beneath. "Then let me—" Voices at the terrace door interrupted. They sprang apart seconds before Lady Winchester and other guests emerged. "Ah, there you are," Lady Winchester called. "We were beginning to think you had absconded entirely." Edward's expression smoothed back into perfect courtesy, but his hand found Scarlett's, fingers intertwining with fierce possession. "Simply stealing a moment of privacy, my lady. Engagement allows certain privileges." The guests laughed knowingly, but Scarlett felt the tremor in Edward's hand, saw the tension in his shoulders, and knew they had crossed some invisible threshold from which there would be no easy return. If you're enjoying this story of second chances and unexpected love, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. And I'm curious, what do you think Scarlett should do? Should she protect her heart and maintain distance, or take the risk and let Edward in? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing from you. The invitation arrived 3 days after the Winchester dinner, delivered on heavy cream paper. "Lord and Lady Ashcombe request the honour of your presence at a formal dinner celebrating their daughter's engagement to Viscount Hartley." Scarlett stared at the invitation with growing dread. Lady Ashcombe, who had been present for her humiliation at the charity ball. Lady Ashcombe, who had questioned the legitimacy of her engagement with barely veiled contempt. "We must attend," the Dowager said when Scarlett showed her the invitation. "To decline would suggest fear or shame, neither of which you should feel. But Lady Ashcombe despises me. Lady Ashcombe despises anyone who achieves what she cannot control." The Dowager's smile was sharp. "Which is precisely why we will attend with absolute confidence." Edward was less sanguine when informed. "My mother has lost her mind," he said flatly, pacing the library. "Lady Ashcombe will use this dinner as an opportunity to humiliate you publicly. Then perhaps we should prove that I am not so easily humiliated," Scarlett replied with more courage than she felt. Edward stopped pacing. "You understand. She will attack where you are most vulnerable. Your family's circumstances, the suddenness of our engagement, any inconsistency in our story." "I understand." Scarlett lifted her chin. "But I have survived worse than Lady Ashcombe's dinner parties." Something shifted in Edward's expression, softening slightly. "You should not have to survive it at all." He crossed to stand before her. "I will be beside you, every moment. If she attempts even the slightest cruelty, I will ensure she regrets it." The protective vehemence made Scarlett's chest tighten. "You cannot fight every battle for me." "Watch me," Edward said quietly. The night of the dinner arrived too quickly. Scarlett dressed with care, choosing a gown of deep burgundy. Edward arrived at her door precisely at 7, wearing evening clothes of severe black and white. "You look formidable," he said. "Lady Ashcombe will not know what struck her." The Ashcombe residence was decorated with aggressive opulence that screamed new money and social climbing. Crystal chandeliers dripped from every ceiling, gold leaf covered every surface. Lady Ashcombe greeted them with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Your Grace, Miss Everhart, how delightful that you could join us." "We would not have missed it," Edward replied with icy courtesy. They were seated strategically, Scarlett between a pompous earl and a baron's wife who examined her with obvious calculation. Edward was placed directly across but 3 seats down, close enough to observe but too far to easily intervene. Lady Ashcombe had planned this carefully. The first course arrived, and with it, the interrogation began. "Miss Everhart," the baron's wife said sweetly, "we have heard so little about your family. Where did you say your father's holdings were located?" "My father was a merchant," Scarlett replied evenly. "His holdings were in trade rather than land." "How refreshing," the Earl interjected with barely concealed condescension. "The Duke has always been progressive in his associations." Scarlett felt heat climb her neck, but kept her expression serene. She caught Edward's gaze across the table. His jaw was tight, eyes dark with barely restrained anger. "Trade can be quite lucrative," the Baron's wife continued. "Though I suppose recent circumstances have been less favorable. The direct attack landed like a slap. Conversations around them faltered. Circumstances change," Scarlett said carefully. "What matters is how one conducts oneself through adversity." "Indeed," Lady Ashcombe's voice cut through from the head of the table. "Though some might say accepting a duke's offer during financial desperation suggests a certain opportunism rather than genuine affection." The silence that followed was absolute. Scarlett's heart hammered. This was the moment she had dreaded, the accusation laid bare. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but Edward's voice rang out first. "I find it fascinating," Edward said with deadly calm, "that you concern yourself so deeply with the motivations behind my engagement, Lady Ashcombe, particularly given your own daughter's rapid acceptance of Viscount Hartley after 3 unsuccessful seasons." Lady Ashcombe's face went pale, then crimson. "Your Grace, I merely—" "You merely what?" Edward continued, tone conversational, but words surgical. "Questioned whether the woman I have chosen to marry is worthy of my regard. Suggested that financial necessity somehow diminishes genuine connection. Implied that I am fool enough to be manipulated by circumstances I did not myself investigate thoroughly." The dinner table had gone utterly silent. Edward stood, and every eye turned to him. "Let me be absolutely clear." He moved around the table toward Scarlett, with predatory grace. "I chose Miss Everhart not because of her family's circumstances, but in spite of them. I chose her because she possesses intelligence that challenges me, dignity that inspires me, and courage that humbles me." He stopped beside Scarlett's chair, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder with unmistakable possession. Her family's financial difficulties only demonstrate that she understands the value of genuine partnership over social performance. His gaze swept the table, landing on Lady Ashcombe with particular intensity. "If anyone in this room believes they can question my judgment or insult my future wife without consequence, I invite them to reconsider." Carefully. The threat was unmistakable. Lady Ashcombe looked like she had swallowed glass. "Your Grace, I assure you no insult was intended." "Then perhaps you should be more mindful of how your words might be interpreted," Edward replied. "Now, if you will excuse us, I find I have lost my appetite for this particular gathering." He offered his hand to Scarlett, who took it with trembling fingers. They left in profound silence, collected their coats, and departed into the night air. Scarlett did not speak until they were in the carriage. "You did not need to do that. You have made an enemy." "I already had an enemy," Edward said flatly. "Tonight I simply clarified the price of her continued hostility." "But you defended me as if—" "As if what?" Edward turned to face her fully. "As if you matter to me. As if the thought of anyone hurting you makes me want to commit violence. As if hearing that woman question your worth made me forget every rule of polite society." Scarlett's breath caught. "Edward, I meant every word I said in there. Every single word. You challenge me. You inspire me. You humble me." His hand came up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "And somewhere between the fabricated engagement and tonight, I stopped pretending any of that was performance." Scarlett leaned into his touch without conscious thought. "What are we doing?" "I do not know," Edward admitted. "But I know I can no longer maintain the distance we agreed upon. I know that when other men look at you, I feel possessive in ways that should alarm me, but do not. And I know that if you do not feel the same, I will respect your wishes." "But Scarlett," he paused, using her given name for the first time, "please tell me you feel something too." The carriage rolled through London streets, while Scarlett struggled with truth and fear. "I feel everything," she whispered finally. "I feel too much, and it terrifies me because this was supposed to be temporary and safe." Edward's other hand came up to frame her face. "Then, do not protect yourself. Take the risk. Trust that what we are building is real, regardless of how it began." "And if it ends?" "Then we will face that together," Edward interrupted. "But Scarlett, I do not believe this will end. I believe we have found something rare and precious, and I refuse to let it slip away because of fear." His thumb traced her lower lip. and Scarlett's eyes closed at the sensation. "Let me court you properly," Edward said quietly. "Let me show you that this is genuine." Scarlett opened her eyes to find him watching her with an expression that stole her breath. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Edward." He smiled then, truly smiled, and it transformed his face from severe to devastating. "Then I am the luckiest man in London." The carriage pulled up to the Thornhill residence, but neither of them moved immediately. They sat in the darkness, hands intertwined, breathing the same air, and acknowledged silently that everything had changed, and that there would be no going back to careful distance or strategic performance. Only forward into uncertain territory, where feelings had become undeniably real. The days that followed the Ashcombe dinner transformed into something Scarlett had not anticipated, genuine courtship wrapped in the pretense of engagement. Edward was everywhere and nowhere, his presence both constant and carefully measured, as if he too was learning to navigate this new territory where performance had given way to truth. Mornings found them in the conservatory. Edward tended his orchids while Scarlett read beside the fountain, their silence comfortable rather than awkward. Sometimes he would explain the peculiarities of a particular species, his voice soft with genuine passion. Sometimes she would read passages aloud, and he would stop his work to listen with complete attention. Afternoons meant the library. Edward had estate business that required his focus, and Scarlett discovered a passion for history that the Thornhill collection satisfied magnificently. They worked in companionable quiet, broken occasionally by debates about philosophy, politics, art. "You are wrong about Locke," Edward said one afternoon, looking up from correspondence with amusement. "I am never wrong about Locke," Scarlett replied without looking up. "You simply refuse to acknowledge that natural rights extend beyond property ownership." Edward set down his pen and leaned back. "Convince me." What followed was an hour-long discussion that ranged from political theory to practical application, their voices rising with passion but never crossing into genuine anger. When Mrs. Thornbury interrupted to announce tea, Edward blinked as if waking from a trance. "We have been arguing for over an hour," he said with wonder. "You have been losing an argument for over an hour," Scarlett corrected. Edward laughed, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine, that Scarlett felt warmth bloom in her chest. Evenings were more formal. The Dowager insisted on proper dinners, with tedious adherence to social ritual. But even here intimacy crept in through small gestures, Edward refilling Scarlett's wineglass before she noticed it was empty. Scarlett catching his eye when his mother said something particularly absurd, sharing silent amusement. The way his hand would find hers after dessert, thumb tracing circles on her palm. It was during one such evening, 6 weeks into their engagement, that everything shifted. The Dowager had retired early with a headache, leaving Edward and Scarlett alone in the small parlor. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of warmth and intimacy. Edward sat in his usual chair, a book open but unread. Scarlett occupied the settee, embroidery abandoned beside her. "You seem troubled," Edward said finally. Scarlett looked up. "I was thinking about my family. I received a letter from my mother today. Bad news?" "No, good news, actually. My father has secured new contracts. Small ones, but enough to begin rebuilding." Scarlett twisted her hands. She thanked me, said that my marriage to you had opened doors that had been closed. The guilt in her voice was unmistakable. Edward set aside his book and crossed to sit beside her, close but not touching. "Scarlett, look at me." She turned to face him and found his expression serious but gentle. "Your family's improved circumstances are not a lie," Edward said quietly. "The engagement may have begun as fabrication, but the benefits are real. You have done nothing wrong." "But they believe this is real," Scarlett whispered. "They believe I will actually become your wife." "And what do you believe?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Scarlett's breath caught. "I believe that in 2 weeks our 3 months will conclude. I believe that we agreed to end this amicably, to part as friends." "That was the agreement," Edward acknowledged. "Do you still want that?" Scarlett's heart hammered. "What do you want?" Edward's hand came up to cup her face, his touch achingly familiar now. "I want to wake up and find you already in the conservatory." I want to argue with you about philosophy and lose gracefully. I want to watch you charm impossible dowagers and defend you against anyone foolish enough to question your worth." He paused, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I want you, Scarlett. Not as a convenient solution, not as a temporary arrangement, as my wife, my partner, my equal in all things." Scarlett felt tears prick her eyes. "Edward, I know the timing is poor," he continued, voice rough with emotion. "I know we have only weeks left in our agreement. I know you have every right to walk away, but I am asking you to stay, not out of obligation, not out of gratitude, but because somewhere between the library debates and the morning silences, I fell in love with you." The words landed like a physical blow, stealing Scarlett's breath. "You love me," she whispered. "Desperately," Edward admitted. "Completely. In ways that should terrify me but only make me want to be better. Braver. Worthy of the extraordinary woman who somehow ended up pretending to be mine." Scarlett's hands came up to frame his face. "I thought I was alone in this. I thought surely you were still performing, still maintaining the facade." Edward turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "I stopped performing the night I defended you at the Ashcombe dinner. Possibly before that. Possibly the moment you walked into the library and challenged every assumption I had about what I wanted from life." The rain continued its steady rhythm as they sat together, hands exploring faces with reverent tenderness. Scarlett traced the strong line of Edward's jaw, the aristocratic nose, the mouth that smiled so rarely but transformed him completely when it did. "I love you too," she said finally, voice breaking. "I have loved you for weeks and been terrified to admit it because I thought you would feel trapped, obligated." Edward made a sound that was half laugh, half groan. "We are both fools." "The most fortunate fools in London," Scarlett agreed. Edward leaned forward slowly, giving her time to retreat, to refuse. But Scarlett met him halfway, her lips finding his with a hunger that had been building for weeks. The kiss was gentle at first, a question asked and answered. Then Edward's hand slid into her hair and Scarlett's fingers gripped his shoulders, and gentleness transformed into need. His mouth moved against hers with devastating skill, coaxing responses she had not known she was capable of giving. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Edward rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because my mother orchestrated this, not because society expects it, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Scarlett laughed, the sound watery with emotion. "We are already engaged. Then make it real," Edward replied. "Say yes not to a performance but to a partnership, to building something genuine from the ashes of manipulation and fear." Scarlett pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. She saw vulnerability there, and hope, and love so fierce it took her breath away. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything. Yes to partnership and debates and morning silences. Yes to facing your impossible mother together. Yes to building something real." Edward kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands mapping the curve of her waist, the line of her spine. Scarlett melted into him, into the warmth and strength and rightness of being held by someone who saw her completely and loved her anyway. When they finally separated, both disheveled and grinning, Edward pulled her close. "I want to do this properly," he said, voice rough. "I want to court you as you deserve." Scarlett rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We have time for proper courtship later. Right now I just want this, us, without pretense or performance." Edward's arms tightened around her. "Then that is what you shall have." They spent hours in that small parlor, talking and touching and discovering the shape of a future neither had dared to hope for. And when Edward finally escorted her back to her chambers in the early hours of morning, both knew that everything had irrevocably changed. The performance was over. The truth had begun. The opera house glittered with false glamour, box seats filled with London's elite performing their own elaborate theatrics. Scarlett sat beside Edward in the Thornhill box, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, his thigh pressed against hers, his hand resting possessively on the back of her chair, his breath occasionally stirring the hair at her temple when he leaned close to whisper observations about the performance below. But Scarlett could not focus on the stage. Her attention was consumed by the tension radiating from Edward, by the way his fingers would occasionally brush her shoulder or trace patterns on her gloved arm, by the heat in his gaze when she turned to meet his eyes in the darkness. 3 days had passed since their confession in the small parlor. 3 days of stolen kisses in shadowed corridors, of heated glances across dinner tables, of Edward's control visibly fraying with each passing hour. The dowager had noticed, of course, her knowing smile suggesting she understood far more than propriety allowed her to acknowledge. Tonight felt different, dangerous, as if something fundamental was about to shift. During the intermission, Lord Hartwell approached their box with his daughter, a vapid young woman who simpered at Edward with transparent ambition. "Your Grace," Lord Hartwell said jovially. "What a magnificent performance. Though I confess I find myself more interested in your upcoming nuptials than in Italian opera, when might we expect the happy occasion?" Edward's hand found Scarlett's, fingers intertwining with fierce possession. "Soon," he replied, his voice carrying an edge that made Lord Hartwell blink. "Very soon, in fact. I find I have little patience for extended engagements." "How romantic," the daughter breathed, shooting Scarlett a look of pure envy. After they departed, Scarlett turned to Edward. "Soon? We have not actually discussed timing." Edward's eyes burned in the dim light. "I know what I want, Scarlett. I want you as my wife in truth, not merely in name. I want the right to wake beside you, to claim you publicly and privately, to stop pretending restraint I no longer feel." The raw honesty in his voice made Scarlett's breath catch. "Edward." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her lower lip. "I am trying to be honorable, to give you time and proper courtship. But watching other men look at you, hearing them discuss you as if you were still available, makes me want to commit violence." "I am not available," Scarlett said quietly. "I have not been available since the moment you defended me at Lady Ashcombe's dinner. Perhaps even before that." Edward's expression transformed, control slipping to reveal raw need beneath. "Then marry me. This week. Next week. I no longer care about elaborate ceremonies or social expectations. I care about making you mine in every way that matters." Before Scarlett could respond, the lights dimmed for the second act, but Edward's hand remained clasped in hers, his thumb tracing maddening circles on her palm that made concentration impossible. The opera concluded in a flourish of music and applause, but Scarlett barely registered any of it. Edward helped her into her cloak with hands that lingered at her shoulders, his breath warm against her neck as he whispered, "Come home with me tonight." "I live in your home," Scarlett replied, pulse racing. "You know what I mean," Edward said, voice rough with desire. "Come to my chambers tonight. Let me show you what I feel, what I want, what we can have together." Scarlett turned to face him, seeing vulnerability and hunger warring in his expression. "We are not yet married." "We will be," Edward replied. "And I am not asking you to compromise yourself. I am asking you to trust me, to let me worship you as you deserve." The drive home was silent tension, both of them hyper-aware of the other, the air thick with unspoken promises. When they arrived at the townhouse, the dowager had already retired, leaving them alone in the entrance hall with only candlelight and possibility. Edward offered his hand. "Scarlett." It was question and plea and promise, all at once. Scarlett placed her hand in his. "Yes." Edward led her through quiet corridors to his private chambers, a suite she had never entered. The sitting room was masculine and elegant, leather furniture and dark wood, but beyond it lay his bedroom, dominated by a massive four-poster bed that made Scarlett's heart hammer. Edward closed the door behind them and turned to face her, candlelight casting shadows across his features. "We stop here if you are uncertain. We stop the moment you say stop. You have complete control, Scarlett. Always." Scarlett crossed to him, emboldened by love and trust and the overwhelming need to finally stop pretending restraint. "I do not want to stop. I want you, all of you, tonight." Edward's control shattered. His mouth found hers with desperate hunger, and Scarlett melted into him, her hands sliding into his hair as his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The kiss was consuming, all-encompassing. unlike anything they had shared before. His hands moved to the buttons at her back, fingers trembling slightly. "May I?" "Yes," Scarlett breathed. "Please." He undressed her slowly, reverently, pausing to press kisses to each inch of newly revealed skin. Scarlett's breath came in gasps as his lips traced her collarbone, the curve of her shoulder, the sensitive hollow of her throat. When her gown finally pooled at her feet, she stood before him in nothing but thin chemise and stays, vulnerable and wanting. "You are extraordinary," Edward whispered, his hands mapping her waist, her hips, the curve of her spine. "So beautiful it makes me ache." Scarlett reached for his cravat, unpinning it with shaking hands. "Your turn." Edward allowed her to undress him, standing perfectly still as she removed jacket, waistcoat, shirt, revealing the lean strength beneath. Scarlett's hands explored his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart, the heat of his skin, the controlled power in every muscle. When they finally came together on the bed, Edward took his time, learning her body with devastating thoroughness. His mouth traced patterns across her skin, while his hands discovered what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch, what made her whisper his name like a prayer. "Scarlett," he murmured against her throat. "Tell me you want this." "I want this," she gasped, her hands gripping his shoulders. "I want you. Please, Edward." He moved over her, eyes locked on hers, and when they finally joined, Scarlett felt complete in ways she had never imagined possible. They moved together in perfect rhythm, hands clasped, foreheads touching, breathing the same air as passion built to something overwhelming and transformative. When release came, it crashed through them both with devastating intensity. Edward's mouth finding hers to swallow their cries, Scarlett's body arching into his, as pleasure rewrote everything she thought she knew about intimacy and connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweat dampened and breathless, Edward's arms wrapped protectively around her, while Scarlett rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat gradually slow. "I love you," Edward said into the darkness, his voice rough with emotion. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Scarlett tilted her head up to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I love you too. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me." Edward's arms tightened. "I did not choose you, Scarlett. My mother forced us together through manipulation and social pressure. But what I feel for you is the one true choice I have ever made. And I would make it again every day for the rest of our lives." They talked through the night, sharing secrets and fears and dreams, their bodies pressed close in the massive bed. Edward traced patterns on her bare shoulder, while Scarlett drew circles on his chest, both reluctant to let sleep interrupt this perfect intimacy. When dawn finally lightened the windows, Edward kissed her forehead with infinite tenderness. "Stay with me. Always." Scarlett smiled against his chest. "Where else would I possibly go?" And in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with sunlight beginning to paint the room gold, they both knew that what had begun as manipulation and desperation had transformed into something rare and precious and absolutely real. The performance was long over. This was the truth that mattered. The morning after changed everything and nothing. Scarlett returned to her own chambers before the household stirred, but the servants knew. Mrs. Thornbury's knowing glances, the maid's barely concealed smiles carried an awareness that made Scarlett's cheeks burn. The dowager said nothing, but her satisfied expression at breakfast spoke volumes. Edward was transformed. Gone was the carefully controlled duke who maintained proper distance. In his place was a man openly devoted, his eyes following Scarlett across rooms, his hand finding hers at every opportunity, his smile easy and genuine. For 3 perfect days, Scarlett allowed herself to believe that fairy tales could be real, that a bankrupt merchant's daughter could genuinely become a duchess through love rather than manipulation. Then Lady Ashcombe struck. The first hint came during morning calls. Mrs. Pemberton arrived with exaggerated sympathy dripping from every word. "My dear Miss Everhart, I felt compelled to warn you. There are whispers, questions about the nature of your engagement to His Grace." Scarlett set down her teacup with careful precision. What manner of questions? Mrs. Pemberton leaned forward conspiratorially. Lady Ashcombe has been making inquiries about dates, about witnesses, about whether anyone actually saw you and the Duke together before the announcement. Scarlett felt ice settle in her stomach. I see. I am certain it is nothing, Mrs. Pemberton continued, her tone suggesting otherwise. But in our world, perception matters as much as truth. If Lady Ashcombe can prove the engagement was arranged rather than genuine, she cannot prove what is not true, Scarlett interrupted firmly. The Duke and I are genuinely devoted to one another. After Mrs. Pemberton departed, Scarlett sat alone in the drawing room, mind racing. Lady Ashcombe was investigating, checking dates, interrogating servants. If she discovered the truth about that first night, Edward found her there an hour later, staring at nothing. What has happened? He demanded, kneeling before her chair. Scarlett, you are pale as death, she told him everything. Mrs. Pemberton's warning, Lady Ashcombe's investigation, the mounting evidence that could unravel their carefully constructed narrative. Edward's expression darkened. Let her investigate. Let her discover whatever she wishes. Our feelings are genuine now. That is what matters. But Scarlett saw what Edward refused to acknowledge. She saw the scandal brewing, the whispers that would follow them, the questions about whether the Duke had been trapped. I need to speak with your mother, Scarlett said quietly. The Dowager received her in the small parlour, tea service laid out with elegant precision. She listened to Scarlett's concerns without interruption. Lady Ashcombe is dangerous when she feels slighted, the Dowager said finally. And we did slight her, publicly, repeatedly. Then we must act before she can damage Edward's reputation beyond repair. The Dowager's eyes sharpened. What are you suggesting? A public gesture, Scarlett said, voice steady despite fear. Something that proves Edward chose me freely. That removes any question of manipulation. That evening, the Dowager hosted an impromptu gathering. Small, intimate, but carefully composed of society's most influential voices. Scarlett wore deep emerald silk and the sapphire necklace, armor against what was to come. Edward sensed something was wrong the moment he entered. His eyes found Scarlett across the room, questions in his gaze, but she smiled with false brightness and turned to engage Lady Winchester in conversation. It was during dessert that Lady Ashcombe made her move. Your Grace, she said sweetly, voice carrying across the table. I have been hearing the most extraordinary stories about your engagement. Some say it was rather sudden, almost orchestrated, one might say. The table fell silent. Edward's jaw tightened dangerously. I fail to see how the private understanding between myself and my fiancée concerns you. Oh, but it concerns us all, Lady Ashcombe replied. The Thornhill title is one of England's most distinguished. Naturally, we wish to ensure it passes to worthy hands. She smiled with razor sharpness, to legitimate heirs born of genuine affection rather than social manipulation. The implication was clear and insulting. Edward stood, fury radiating from every line of his body. How dare you? I invited Lady Ashcombe tonight precisely because of her concerns, the Dowager interrupted smoothly. And I believe Miss Everhart has something she wishes to say. Scarlett rose on trembling legs. Lady Ashcombe is correct to question the circumstances of my engagement, Scarlett said clearly. Her directness caused gasps around the table. The truth is that I entered into this arrangement during a time of great desperation. My family faced financial ruin, and the Dowager Duchess offered a solution that seemed miraculous. Edward made a strangled sound of protest, but Scarlett continued. What began as a practical arrangement, however, transformed into something neither of us anticipated. She turned to face Edward directly. I fell in love with a man who saw past my circumstances to my character, who defended me against cruelty without hesitation, who challenged my mind and cherished my opinions. Edward's expression was anguished. Scarlett, what are you doing? I am giving you a choice, she said quietly, though her words carried to every listener. I am standing before witnesses and releasing you from our engagement. If you wish to walk away without scandal, without question, without burden, you may do so now. I will not hold you to promises made under pressure. The silence was absolute. Have you lost your mind? Edward said hoarsely. No, Scarlett's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. I have found clarity. I love you too much to let questions of manipulation shadow our marriage. I love you too much to trap you in obligations you did not freely choose, so I am choosing for both of us. I am setting you free. Edward crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with desperate tenderness. You foolish, extraordinary, infuriating woman. Did you truly think I would let you sacrifice yourself to protect my reputation? I know how society works, Scarlett whispered. I know what they will say. And you thought releasing me from our engagement would somehow improve the situation? Edward's laugh was broken. Scarlett, do you not understand? I do not care what they say. I do not care how this began. I care only about how it ends. He turned to address the room, his voice ringing with authority. Let me make this absolutely clear to everyone present, especially you, Lady Ashcombe. I proposed to Scarlett Everhart not once but twice. The first time was performance forced by circumstance. The second time was genuine, given freely, offered with my whole heart. She has not trapped me. I have begged her to stay. He pulled a document from his inner pocket and held it up. This is a legal instrument I had my solicitors prepare this morning. It guarantees financial security for Scarlett's family, regardless of whether our marriage proceeds. He met Lady Ashcombe's shocked gaze. If I were being manipulated or trapped, would I ensure her family's welfare even if she walks away? The logic was irrefutable. Edward turned back to Scarlett, dropping to one knee before the assembled witnesses. Scarlett Everhart, I am asking you for the 3rd time, not because my mother orchestrated circumstances, not because society expects it, not because you need financial security. I am asking because I love you desperately and cannot imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Scarlett's face. You are certain? You will not regret this? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Edward's voice broke. Please, Scarlett, say yes. Scarlett pulled him to his feet and kissed him before the shocked assembly. Yes, she whispered against his mouth. Yes, Edward, always yes. The room erupted in applause, but Scarlett heard none of it. She was aware only of Edward's arms around her, his heart beating against hers, and the absolute certainty that they had finally, truly chosen each other, free from manipulation, free from obligation, free to love. 3 weeks later, Scarlett stood in the private chapel of the Thornhill estate, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows to paint the stone floor in jewel tones. Her gown was ivory silk with delicate lace, elegant in its simplicity. Alice stood beside her as maid of honor, tears already streaming down her face. "Are you ready?" Alice whispered. Scarlett thought of everything that had brought her to this moment. The charity ball where she had stood invisible and ashamed, the dowager's impossible proposition, Edward's fury transforming into protection, the slow burn of genuine connection replacing performance. "I have never been more ready for anything," Scarlett replied. The chapel doors opened, and Scarlett walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Thomas Everhart held himself with renewed dignity, his business restored, but his eyes were suspiciously bright as he prepared to give his daughter away. Edward waited at the altar, resplendent in formal attire but made extraordinary by the expression on his face, pure joy mixed with wonder. When their eyes met, his smile transformed him completely. The ceremony was brief and beautiful. Traditional vows spoken with voices that shook with emotion, rings exchanged with trembling hands, a kiss that sealed promises made first in desperation but renewed in love. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in applause, but Scarlett heard only Edward's whisper against her ear. "Mine. Finally. Truly mine. Yours," she replied. "Always yours." The wedding breakfast was held in the Great Hall. 50 guests, carefully chosen, all witnesses to the transformation of a fabricated engagement into genuine devotion. The dowager raised her glass for the first toast, her expression softer than Scarlett had ever seen. "When I first conceived this plan," the dowager said, "I believed I was solving a problem. My son refused to consider marriage. Miss Everhart's family faced ruin." She paused, her gaze moving between Edward and Scarlett. What I did not anticipate was that I would bring together two people so perfectly suited that they would transform obligation into partnership, performance into truth. She raised her glass higher, to the Duke and Duchess of Thornhill. Edward stood, pulling Scarlett to her feet beside him, his arm wrapped around her waist with casual possession. "My mother is correct," Edward said. "This marriage began in manipulation and desperation, but it transformed into something far more valuable." He turned to face Scarlett fully. "My wife challenges me intellectually, supports me emotionally, and sees past my title to the man I wish to be." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a document, holding it up for all to see. "Before we married, I had my solicitors prepare this legal instrument. It guarantees financial security for the Everhart family in perpetuity, regardless of the success or failure of this marriage. Should Scarlett choose to leave me tomorrow, her family would remain protected." Gasps rippled through the gathering. "I did this," Edward continued, "to remove any question of mercenary motivation from our union, to prove beyond doubt that Scarlett married me for love, not necessity, that I chose her freely, knowing she had no financial reason to stay." He met Lady Ashcombe's shocked gaze. "Let no one ever question the legitimacy of this match." He turned back to Scarlett, his voice softening. "You married a duke who would have given you security regardless. I married a woman who chose me despite having the freedom to walk away. That is the foundation of this partnership. Choice, freedom, love." Scarlett's eyes filled with tears. "You did not need to do this, I know," Edward said simply, "but I wanted there to be no doubt. Not in society's mind, not in your family's understanding, and most importantly, not in your heart. You are here because you want to be." Scarlett kissed him before the cheering assembly, uncaring of propriety. This man who had defended her, protected her, seen her, and chosen her, deserved every ounce of devotion she possessed. The celebration continued through the afternoon, but eventually, Edward and Scarlett escaped to the privacy of the ducal suite. Edward had ordered it completely redecorated, replacing his mother's austere choices with warmth and color. "Welcome home, Duchess," Edward said, pulling her into his arms. Scarlett laughed, the sound full of joy. "It still sounds impossible." "You were always worthy of the title," Edward replied seriously. "Society simply needed time to recognize what I saw immediately." They made love with tender intensity, celebrating the beginning of their genuine marriage with whispered promises and gentle touches. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms as moonlight painted the room silver, they talked of the future. Years later, the story of the Duke and Duchess of Thornhill would be told in drawing rooms across London, as proof that unconventional beginnings could lead to extraordinary partnerships. Scarlett became known for her charitable work, particularly her advocacy for families facing financial hardship. She established funds and programs that gave others the second chances she had received. Edward's political career flourished with Scarlett at his side, her insights shaping policy and her grace winning allies. Together they hosted salons where intellectual discourse mattered more than pedigree. They had 3 children, a son who inherited Edward's intelligence and Scarlett's compassion, and twin daughters who combined the best qualities of both parents. The children grew up in a household where love was demonstrated daily, where partnership was modeled consistently. Lady Ashcombe faded from prominence, her attempts at social sabotage remembered only as cautionary tales. The Dowager lived to see her grandchildren, her satisfaction at having orchestrated the match tempered by genuine affection for the daughter-in-law who had exceeded every expectation. And on quiet evenings, when social obligations did not demand their presence, Edward and Scarlett would sit together in the conservatory among the orchids, hands intertwined, discussing philosophy, or simply enjoying comfortable silence. Sometimes Scarlett would remember that first night at the charity ball, standing invisible beside potted palms. She would remember the Dowager's impossible proposition, Edward's controlled fury, the slow transformation of performance into truth. "What are you thinking?" Edward would ask, always attuned to her shifts in mood. "That I am grateful," Scarlett would reply, "for your mother's manipulation, for circumstance forcing us together, for every moment that led us here." Edward would pull her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I am grateful too for your courage, for your willingness to take the risk, for choosing me when you had every reason to walk away." And they would sit together as darkness fell. Two people who had found extraordinary love in the most unlikely circumstances, proof that sometimes the best things in life begin not with choice, but with chance transformed by devotion. What began as a desperate gamble transformed into a love story that defied every expectation. Scarlett learned that worthiness is not measured by circumstance, but by character. Edward discovered that the partnership he claimed not to want was exactly what his heart needed, and together they proved that love freely chosen, after all pretense falls away, is the strongest foundation of all. If this story touched your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button. It helps more people discover these tales of unexpected love and second chances. Please subscribe to the channel for more stories, and I'd love to know where in the world are you listening from. Drop your location in the comments below. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share the next story with you.